What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a great day as always. So today we're going over the question that I see asked all the time on Jeep Grand Cherokee Facebook groups. Can you run 37s with a 6.5-inch long arm kit? I honestly see this question like daily in all the Facebook groups I'm in. So today we're here to answer your question, show you what you have to do to run 37s. Honestly, it's not just slap 37s on your Jeep. There's a lot of other things you're going to have to do in order to run that setup. It's not going to clear the tires turning or anything like that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it, show you guys what you have to do to run them and get everything figured out like that. So here's my 2001 Jeep WJ 6.5-inch Iron Rock Off-Road long arm kit with some 37 1250 R17 Ironman tires. So as you guys can see, they're under the car, they're fitting. These actually came off the Wrangler, they were spares, so they are a little bit low tread. So they're not true 37s anymore, they're probably more like 36.5, 36 in spots. But they're fitting under the car. However, the car is not driving. The reason for that obviously is I'm adjusting the control arms and everything, but clearance wise, there's none. So you can't just slap these tires on the Jeep and call it a day. This axle's not perfectly centered yet, but all in all, you're going to have to trim. The back's kind of easy to trim up until you get to the door. For here, you can trim basically up to where the little ridge is there. You can cut all that out, cut slits and bend it back in. This is where it gets tricky. So as you can see, you can only cut in maybe an inch or 3/4 of an inch and then bend that in. You're not going to get a ton of room here gained. Best bet would be sliding the axle back, stretching the Jeep a little bit. However, you can't do that with a stock fuel tank there because that blocks the way. You can only stretch it a couple inches without hitting that. So the front is a little easier. This side, you can see this axle's centered over here and you still have to trim. So I went ahead and cut the plastic off there and see where we're going to cut. I'll make a video on cutting this, but I had to hit this in so we could turn. Basically, it's just set up so we can move it, drive it down the road and everything, but this doesn't have room to flex. So I will make a video, like I said, on cutting the fenders on this Jeep soon and everything. I have to do that before I can take it wheeling. The front, a little bit easier to trim. As you guys can see, I just trimmed the front bumper a little bit, put some zip ties in there and reattached the inner fender liner. So that was relatively simple. That was just so we could turn and move it around the driveway. Still rubs a little bit at full lock. Back still rubs a lot. So this is actually a lot easier to cut. Remove the plastic and you can cut pretty high up in there and do whatever you want there. So I'll make a video on how I end up cutting this. We are actually going to be throwing 35s on there for the time being until the axles are done. But it's not only trimming that you have to worry about, it's actually your axles too. So if you don't have a V8, you have this trash axle. It's a Dana 35, absolute junk, probably the worst axle in a Jeep. And honestly, it's not built to hold 35s, let alone 37s. In the front, you're not much better off. You have a Dana 30 in most of these, and that's also junk. It's not the strongest axle. It's also not the worst. I mean, you can build it up if you want to, but those aren't designed to hold the weight of those tires. You're adding a ton of weight to the Jeep with these. I don't know the exact weight measurements on these, but they're just not designed for it. You're adding a ton of extra wear and tear on all the components, ring and pinion, axle shafts, all that stuff. And steering also is a huge thing people overlook. So I'll show you the steering that we have on the Wrangler, similar to what we're going to be putting on the Grand Cherokee. And these tires are only 3 inches bigger. So like, as you can see, the steering is a lot beefier than the stock steering on the WJ. It's another thing that you're going to want to upgrade if you're going to these big, oversized, heavy tires, along with your brakes. People overlook brakes all the time. And with adding all that weight, you're going to have to upgrade your brakes. That way you can stop the Jeep. These stock little brakes aren't really going to do the best job stopping it. I mean, yeah, you'll come to a stop, but it's not going to be the best or the ideal setup. So you're going to want to upgrade brakes, steering, and probably your axles, honestly. Another thing that people overlook all the time with these big, heavy tires is just how much weight you're adding to it. These, I believe, are like 120 pounds each. Those probably more like 100, something like that. But you're still adding 400 pounds on all the corners. It's a lot of weight to add to your Jeep. And for the front end, you're going to end up going through ball joints pretty quick if you don't upgrade those to some kind of nice aftermarket ball joint. That's definitely something I would look into relatively quick, because when those go out, you get death wobble, and we all know how terrible that is in Grand Cherokees to begin with, so you might as well fix that before it even happens. I'll take you in the garage and show you a Dana 30. that we actually had 37s on. This is a Wrangler Dana 30, so it's a little bit wider. We're actually going to be putting this axle under the Grand Cherokee in the future. But this is how a ball joint should be, nice and tight. This is what the lower one looks like now. So this is going to happen relatively quick if you guys put 37s on your Jeep, and you're going to want to upgrade to some kind of aftermarket ball joint. I have Teraflex ball joints on the Wrangler, and they've held up very well for a year and some wheeling. So I can definitely recommend those to you guys, and they're definitely worth the upgrade. But let's head over here and talk about gears. So your gear ratio is not set up for the 37s. I'm not sure what everybody's stock gear ratio is going to be in the WJs, but I can guarantee you it's not set up for 37s. And gear ratio is actually going to make a huge difference. When I changed that in the Wrangler, it was definitely worth the upgrade. It made the Jeep drive way, way better, more responsive to like throttle input and everything like that. And it brought the gas mileage up quite a bit. Your stock gas mileage is going to plummet if you throw 37s on your stock axles without upgrading them. Then you kind of come into the situation of should you upgrade your stock axles or should you go ahead and swap them out like I did on my Wrangler. My opinion, you should probably swap them. You can do a Wrangler axle swap with Rubicon axles, or you can go ahead and do 1-tons. I'm going to be making videos on both those swaps since we're swapping both my Jeeps. So you guys can look forward to that content and show you guys how it's done. We'll do comparisons and stuff like that. But as you see, it's not as simple as just throwing 37s on the Jeep, trimming it, and calling it a day. And like I said, these tires are kind of low tread, so they're not true 37s anymore. So if you had real brand new 37s, it would be worse setup than this. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it. You can trim your fenders and go with it, but however much you want to upgrade depends on how reliable your Jeep's going to be. And honestly, if we're going to be wheeling these, they might as well be reliable and all set up correctly. The reason you can fit big tires on the Wrangler and not the Grand Cherokee is the wheel wells. The wheel wells are massive on the Wrangler compared to the Grand Cherokee without cutting. I mean, you can take your fenders off and throw spacers and 40s on a stock Wrangler if you really wanted to. It would take a lot to fit that on a Grand Cherokee, set up reliably, ready to go off-roading, all that kind of stuff. Alright guys, so as you see, it's not as simple as just throwing a 6.5-inch lift on there and then throwing some 37s on there. There's kind of a lot of other things that need to be done and should be done in order to get it all set up right. The axle stuff's kind of optional. I mean, I ran 37s on a stock Wrangler axle for a little while. I wouldn't recommend it if you were trying to make that axle last. The only reason I did it was because I knew I had the Curry axles in my garage ready to go in. If I was trying to daily drive this Jeep and wheel it, 37s would not be the move at all. So those are just some things to keep in mind when you're doing it. I see the question asked all the time all over Facebook, so I figured to make this a video for you, show you guys just how much trimming you're going to have to do. And like I said, those tires are a little low on treads. They're not true 37s anymore. So if you had a full 37 brand new, it's going to be a lot more room taken up than that. So you have to cut even more. The back's where you're going to get the issues, obviously cutting because the door's so close like we just went over. But I hope this video helped you guys figure out if you can run 37s on a 6.5-inch lift. Technically you can, depending on how much work you want to put in and how much money you want to put into upgrading stuff. Depends on how reliable it's going to be. So as always guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.